It was a stormy night, and I was driving back from a friend's place, taking the usual route home. The highway was deserted, and the rain was coming down in sheets, making it difficult to see more than a few feet ahead. I was already feeling uneasy, the darkness and isolation of the road getting to me. As I drove, I noticed a figure standing by the side of the road, thumb raised in a hitchhiking gesture. At first, I thought it was just a trick of the light, but as I got closer, I realized it was a person, drenched to the bone and shivering. My initial instinct was to drive past, but something about the figure's desperation struck a chord. I pulled over and the figure rushed towards the car, opening the door and sliding into the passenger seat. "Thanks so much," they said, their voice shaking with cold. "I've been stuck out here for hours." I glanced over, trying to get a better look, but their face was obscured by a hoodie. "No problem," I replied, trying to sound friendly. "Where are you headed?" The figure hesitated, and for a moment I thought they were going to get out of the car, but then they spoke, their voice low and hesitant. "I'm going home, I think?" I raised an eyebrow, unsure what to make of that. "You think?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light. The figure nodded, their eyes fixed on some point ahead. "Yeah, I've been away for a while. I'm not sure if I'll be welcome back." I felt a pang of curiosity, but I didn't push the issue. Instead, I focused on the road, trying to navigate through the storm. As we drove, the figure remained silent, their eyes fixed on the darkness outside. I tried to make small talk, but they barely responded, their answers monosyllabic and cryptic. I began to feel uneasy, the silence between us growing thicker than the fog on the windshield. Suddenly, the figure spoke up, their voice low and urgent. "Take the next exit." I hesitated, unsure why they wanted me to leave the highway. "Are you sure?" I asked, but they just nodded, their eyes fixed on the road signs flashing by. I took the exit, and we found ourselves on a narrow, winding road that seemed to lead deeper into the darkness. The figure leaned forward, their eyes fixed on the GPS screen. "Turn left up ahead," they said, their voice growing more insistent. I turned, and we found ourselves on a dirt road, the trees closing in around us like sentinels. The figure's eyes were fixed on the road ahead, their breathing growing more rapid. I felt a sense of trepidation, my heart pounding in my chest. "Where are we going?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. The figure didn't respond, their eyes fixed on some point ahead. Suddenly, the car's headlights illuminated a figure standing in the middle of the road. It was a woman, her face pale and drawn, her eyes black as coal. She raised a hand, and I felt the car slow to a stop. The figure in the passenger seat got out, their movements jerky and unnatural. "Thanks for the ride," they said, their voice barely above a whisper. I watched in horror as they walked towards the woman, their movements becoming more and more stiff. As they reached her, the woman raised her hand, and the figure's body began to contort, their limbs twisting in ways that were humanly impossible. I realized, too late, that I had made a terrible mistake. I tried to turn the car around, but it was too late. The woman's eyes locked onto me, and I felt a chill run down my spine. I was trapped, alone on a dark highway, with no escape from the horrors that lurked in the shadows. And then, everything went black. When I came to, I found myself sitting in the driver's seat of my car, the engine still running and the headlights illuminating the empty road ahead. My heart raced as I tried to piece together what had just happened. The figure and the woman were gone, but the air was thick with an unsettling silence that made my skin crawl. I glanced at the clock on the dashboard. Only a few minutes had passed since I had picked up the hitchhiker. It felt like a lifetime ago. I rubbed my eyes, trying to shake off the disorientation, but the memory of that twisted figure haunted me. Instinctively, I turned the car around, desperate to get back to the safety of the highway. As I drove, I kept glancing in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see the woman or the figure standing behind me. But the road was empty, just me and the oppressive darkness of the forest closing in on either side. Once I reached the highway, I breathed a sigh of relief, but the sense of dread lingered. I drove faster, hoping to put as much distance as possible between myself and that cursed road. The rain had eased, but the clouds hung heavy in the sky. Suddenly, my phone buzzed in the passenger seat, startling me. I glanced over and saw a message from my friend asking if I had made it home yet. I quickly typed a response, but as I did, I noticed something out of the corner of my eye. There, standing at the edge of the highway, was the figure I had picked up. My heart dropped. I slammed on the brakes, the tires screeching against the asphalt. The figure raised its hand, and I felt an overwhelming urge to let them in again. "No!" I shouted, shaking my head violently. I couldn't let this happen again. I hit the gas, speeding past them, my heart racing with fear. I glanced back in the rearview mirror and saw the figure standing still, watching me with those haunting eyes. As I drove, I couldn't shake the feeling of being followed. Every shadow seemed to stretch and twist, and I could swear I could hear whispers in the wind. I turned up the radio, trying to drown out the noise, but the static seemed to merge with the whispers, creating a cacophony that made my skin crawl. Just when I thought I was finally free, I noticed a car behind me, its headlights blinding in the darkness. I glanced at the rearview mirror and saw it was gaining on me fast. Panic surged within me as I pressed harder on the accelerator, desperate to escape. The car behind me was relentless, tailing me closely, and I could see a figure in the passenger seat. My heart raced as I realized it was the same figure I had picked up. How were they here? I felt a wave of dread wash over me as I realized that I hadn't escaped at all. I took a sharp turn off the highway, hoping to lose them, but they followed without hesitation. I was driving through winding back roads now, the trees looming overhead like dark sentinels. I could barely see where I was going, and the rain began to pour again, making visibility even worse. In a moment of desperation, I spotted a small cabin off the side of the road. I swerved into the driveway, praying it was unoccupied. I jumped out of the car and ran toward the door, pounding on it with my fists. "Please, let me in!" I shouted, my voice echoing in the stillness. To my relief, the door creaked open, revealing an elderly man with a weathered face. "What's wrong?" he asked, concern etched in his features. I rushed past him, glancing back at the road. The figure was still there, standing in the rain, their eyes glowing faintly in the darkness. "Please, you have to help me," I pleaded, my voice trembling. The old man stepped outside, squinting into the night. "What are you running from?" he asked, his voice steady. "They're coming for me," I gasped, pointing toward the road. But when I looked back, the figure was gone. "They were right there," I exclaimed, panic rising in my chest. The old man shook his head, his expression grave. "You've seen them, haven't you? The lost ones?" I nodded, confusion and fear swirling inside me. "What do you mean?" "They wander these roads, trapped between worlds. They seek to take others with them," he explained, his voice low and steady. "You were lucky to find me. Most people don't escape." "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I asked, my voice rising in desperation. As the minutes turned into hours, I tried to calm my racing heart. The old man shared stories of others who had encountered the lost souls, tales of those who had been taken and never returned. Each story was darker than the last, filled with despair and regret. I listened intently, knowing that I was fortunate to have escaped their grasp. But as the night wore on, I began to hear soft knocks at the door, followed by whispers that sent chills down my spine. I glanced at the old man, whose expression remained calm but serious. "Don't answer it," he instructed firmly. "They'll try to lure you out with familiar voices, people you know, or even promises of safety." I swallowed hard, feeling the weight of dread pressing down on me. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, and I could almost make out words, my name, a plea for help. I gripped the arms of the chair, fighting the urge to respond. "Remember, they feed on your fear," the old man reminded me. Stay strong." The night dragged on, each knock and whisper intensifying my anxiety. I could feel the presence of the lost souls outside, their energy swirling like a storm. Just when I thought I couldn't bear it any longer, the first light of dawn began to seep through the cracks in the cabin walls. "Hold on," the old man said, his voice steady. "We're almost there." As the sun began to rise, the whispers turned to frantic cries, and the knocks became desperate. I could feel the air shift, the darkness receding as the light broke through. The old man stood by the door,
with a final
ready to
echoing
confront
knock.
whatever
The
lay
door
outside.
rattled
Violently, but the light enveloped the cabin, creating a barrier against the encroaching shadows. I watched in awe as the figure I had picked up, the lost soul, stood just beyond the threshold, its form flickering like a candle in the wind. "Let me in," it pleaded, its voice a haunting echo. "I just want to go home." But I remembered the old man's warnings. "No," I shouted, shaking my head. "You're not real." As the sun fully rose, the figure began to dissolve, its form disintegrating into mist. The whispers faded, replaced by the soft chirping of birds and the gentle rustle of leaves. The cabin felt lighter, the oppressive weight of the night lifting. The old man turned to me, a faint smile on his face. "You did well. You faced your fear and chose to stand your ground." I felt a wave of relief wash over me, but also a lingering sadness for the lost soul. "What happens to them now?" I asked quietly. "They remain in the shadows, waiting for another chance," he replied, his expression somber. "But you've escaped. You can go back to your life, but remember what you've learned." With a nod of gratitude, I stepped outside into the warm morning light. The road ahead was clear, the darkness of the night behind me. As I drove away from the cabin, I glanced in the rearview mirror one last time, half expecting to see the figure again. But the road was empty, and I felt a sense of closure wash over me. I had faced the darkness and emerged stronger, forever changed by my encounter on the dark highway. As I drove, the sun rose higher in the sky, illuminating the path ahead. The trees that had once loomed ominously now stood tall and welcoming. I realized that I had a choice: to let fear control me or to embrace the light and the life waiting for me beyond the shadows. With each passing mile, I felt lighter, more at peace. I knew I would carry the lessons of that night with me, a reminder of the strength found in vulnerability and the importance of resisting the darkness. And though I would never forget the figure that had tried to lure me into the night, I also understood that I had the power to choose my own path. The dark highway would always exist, but I was no longer afraid. I had escaped its grasp, and I would never let it take me again.